everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jenny and I'm here today to start my May reading wrap-up. May has felt very slow in reading. Today is the 11th and Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day, everybody. And I've been reading a lot of books all at once. I'm reading like 4 books or 5 books, like more than usual, and I just haven't had like a steady reading pace, so it's been a bit of disjointed. But I did just finish the Honeyman Festival by Marian and Engel, and I think maybe one of the reasons that the reading has been a bit slow is because of this book, because of the way it's written. So this is a stream of consciousness one-day book, very similar to Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. So I was several chapters in, maybe like a third of the way through the book before I realized that's what this book was. And when I realized that, I was, pleasantly surprised and happy, because I think this style of book is very intriguing and it has a lot to offer in terms of a slice of a moment. I think it just, so in a lot of ways you should probably read this in one sitting, and I didn't do that, and I did find that the stream of consciousness style made it a bit disjointed for me, and I struggled with remembering the characters, because they'd be just mentioned briefly and then they'd be referred to again a few pages later by their first name, and then I'd forget who they were. So I did struggle a bit with the overall cadence of the book and the rhythm of the book. I probably would have done better with this book on audio. For some reason, stream of consciousness works better for me when I'm listening to it than when I'm trying to read it. It's not a very long book. It's only 175 pages or something. So I really should have been able to read this in like 4 days, 5 days, but I couldn't. The rhythm just wasn't there for me. But that being said, I did really enjoy this. We are following our character, Min, and she is pregnant with her 4th child. We are in 1969 or so. This was published in 1970, which is great because it can go into my 1970s project, which if you're new here, you probably have not heard of before. It's a project that I took on 4 years ago now, where I read books from the 1970s because I feel like I have an affinity towards them. So I have a whole list on Goodreads of the books that I've read from the 1970s, and a curated list that I created, and I'm not actively seeking out those books anymore. I'll read them here and there if they happen, and then I'll add them to my spreadsheet. But it was nice to see that this one would fit onto there. This one is also very important in the burgeoning second wave of feminism movement of writing about women's lives and women's experience. So very much in the vein of a lot of the other books in the 1970s project that I read along those lines. Marian Engel here is just specifically exploring the world of a mother, a woman who had a life. It wasn't a extremely successful life. It was kind of a life that she fumbled through a little bit. This character, Min, is not like a superwoman or an every woman. She is kind of an every woman in that she's very flawed. There's a lot in this book that's very counter to the way we see mothers today. She's drinking when she's pregnant. She's smoking when she's pregnant. She's saying a lot of things about being a mother that are problematic, but that are so realistic as well. She talks about being pregnant with her 4th child after having a first daughter and then twins, how worn out she is, how she's in the kind of doldrums of motherhood here. She's also renting out her attic space to some hippies, some younger generation kids who are very lost and wandering, and they don't know what's going on. And she, we follow her in the span of a day when she is preparing for a party, which is in honor of Honeyman, who was this director that she had a relationship with, and she was in several of his films when she was having a relationship with him. And so it does definitely have that Mrs. Dalloway feel. She's preparing for the people to come over. She's going back and forth between modern day and her past. She's contemplating her past, very stream of consciousness. So it has a lot going for it in that way, but like I said, I did find it a bit disjointed. But in terms of exploring women's issues in the late 60s, early 70s, super important. Exploring a brief snippet of a woman's experience, exploring the mundanity of life, but also that repetition of life, things going on. So even though you're in, the kind of frustrating, repetition, it's all the same, it's so exhausting, that life will go on. And so it has this kind of rhythm to it that feels authentic. So that is The Honeyman Festival by Marian and Engel. And I will check in again with you when I have finished another book. Hi, everybody. Okay, so I finished Grace, a memoir by Grace Coddington. This is such a heavy, big book. It's a hardcover, and then luckily the font is quite large. So it's a pretty fast read, and Grace also includes a lot of illustrations. I didn't realize this about her, but she's an avid drawer. She sketches out maybe I should explain. Grace Coddington is a creative director at Vogue magazine. I believe she's still there, working alongside Anna Wintour. She's a longtime friend of Anna Wintour. This is a memoir about her life, about her work. She is a really interesting character, and she tells you about where she grew up in Wales, how she got into the fashion industry, which was as a model, and then how she became a stylist, fashion editor. And so it's really interesting. I love her work. I have found a lot of her photo shoots to be some of my favorite spreads in Vogue. I was very into Vogue magazine as a teenager. It was an important part of my visual development. I mean, growing up in a time when you don't have the internet to look to for reference images, you're going to look in magazines. That was really the place where you looked. So a lot of the spreads that Grace did in Vogue were some of my favorites. I didn't know that at the time, but now know. And so she talks about her life. She's had a life with lots of travel, lots of work, different, her different loves in her life. And yeah, so that's what this chronicles. And if you are familiar with fashion of the, I didn't know a lot of the references in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, but once you got to the 90s, I kind of knew, in 2000s, who she was talking about. I found this enjoyable. It was a very easy read. Like I said, Grace she draws. When she goes to fashion shows, she draws the clothes, and so she has all these wonderful little illustrations throughout the book. Every chapter has an illustration, and then she has some that are included. There's also lots of photographs of Grace and people she knew and of her work. Later on, you get like a little section with some of her favorite Vogue spreads, and she worked both at British Vogue and at American Vogue. And so that is that. I'm really glad that I read this. I've had it on my read list at the library for such a long time, so I'm really glad to have read this, and I will check in again with you when I have finished another book. Hey all. So I finished another book, I Can't Talk About the Trees Without the Blood by Tiana Clark, and this is a poetry collection. This was published in 2018, I believe, and I really enjoyed this collection. Tiana Clark covers issues like sexuality, relationships, being a Black person in the United States, education, lineage, ancestry. I think that's all I can think of right now, but there's a lot of things brought up here. I really enjoy her style, and there's lots of different formats of poetry, some that are more prose, some that are more stanzas, but there's lots of variety, but you can really hear like a continuous voice in her work, which is great. And I just wanted to read you one poem from it. It's kind of hard to pick one poem that kind of exemplifies this collection. I would say it's very varied, but I thought this poem was very affecting in a pre-death of George Floyd world, but also like keeping on those themes. So the A's have it. When I think of Trayvon Martin, I think of Emmett Till. When I think of Emmett Till, I think of young Black men in the South. Then I think of young white men in the South. I think of my husband, who is white, born and raised in Franklin, Tennessee. I think of how, when he tries to hold my hand, sometimes I pull away, and not because I don't love him, but because I'm alert. I think of other people who are born in the South, that remember the old South, and in fact long for it. I think about the nooses that hung on our back porch when I was little, one for me and one for my mom. I think about how people say, it's not about race, don't make it about race. I wish Black people would stop talking about race, when all I've ever known is being defined by my race. What are you? Where are you from? So I thought that was a really powerful poem, and you know, these issues are still coming up in the US, and I think are perhaps even more important to talk about now, given the current climate and what's going on politically. So a really important collection. I think she has subsequently published another collection, so I'll definitely read more from Tiana Clark in the future. And I'll check in again with you when I have finished another book. Hey everybody. All right, so I finished The Chessmen by Peter May, which is the third book in the Lewis trilogy, which stands for the Isle of Lewis, which is where all of these books take place. So this one is, Finn McLeod is our main character. He is a former detective inspector who grew up on the Isle of Lewis, but then went and lived in Edinburgh. And then he comes back in the first book, and kind of the three books take place very quickly, like in timeline. So there's a plot involving the character Donald, who is the minister and a previous friend of Finn's, that resolves in this story. His relationship with Marsali continues, and a new murder is discovered when Finn goes to work as head of security on a what is it called? Estate. So I was disappointed with this one. This story was very predictable. I figured out every single thing before it happened, except for the last thing, which I think was too much. So I think that maybe one of the problems with these type of novels for me, and with writers such as Peter May, who is a TV writer but also a murder mystery writer, is this idea that you have to keep throwing in twists constantly in order to keep everybody guessing. And the thing is, it actually becomes so unrealistic and so removed from any sort of sense of reality that it just, for me, it lacks a certain groundedness or authenticity in the story. And this happened for this one. I really cared very little about any of the characters. And I especially found the writing about women in this one to be very surface level, stereotypical. So you've got your femme fatale, you've got your good woman that he's trying to keep loving, and you've got your young, misguided teenage girl that needs protection. And really, like, those stereotypes I found really diminished the story for me and made me feel less attached to it. And also, I felt that there was like patterns emerging. So this being the third book of Peter May's that I've read, I felt like his style of writing, his patterns that he puts into his novels started to emerge. And then I realized that I don't enjoy them very much. So I was kind of sad because the first book in this series, The Black House, was good. I liked it quite a bit. The Lewis Man, which is the second book, I really loved, and I gave this 5 stars as far as I remember. I thought the story was very original and very interesting, especially in how it was told, because one of the main characters has dementia, and so you really didn't know what snippets of the story you were getting. This one just doesn't compare in terms of any part of the story. I really never got super into it. And I've continued reading it only because I wanted to conclude, I'd read the other 2 and I wanted to conclude it, but I just didn't feel very satisfied at all with anything that happened in here, really. Either the backstory. I find that Peter May's kind of relying on this idea of the main character having all these deep, dark secrets that he doesn't want to come up. And I just find that's a very it's a limited way to build a character. Like, why do you have to build a character based on the things he's hiding from himself and others rather than his own level of character? Also, I found that the relationships kept being reduced down to, like, at one point, Donald, who is, someone that Marsali, one of the friends in the group, has known her whole life, is ostensibly friends with as an adult, and has been friends with him for a long time. Peter May reduces him to being the man that took her virginity. And I'm like, why are we reducing this relationship to one sexual encounter? Is that really supposed to give some significance to this story? Like, this man who she's known for 40 years, and now because he took her virginity, that's the thing that's going to compel her to defend him or have some depth in the relationship? Like, I just didn't like his description of the women in the story. I think that this might be my last Peter May. I don't know if I might read one of his standalones. There is a 4th book that was just released in this, so it's no longer a trilogy. It is now a series, I guess, with Finn McLeod in the Outer Hebrides. But I'm really not interested in reading it because I think that I understand the formula that Peter May has created for this character. And I think he's just going to keep that formula going. And I'm not really interested in pursuing more. So kind of a disappointing way to wrap up a trilogy, which, the first 2 books I enjoyed much more. I just think that these 2 have a lot of depth in them, and then this one just didn't ring true. So if you were interested in reading these, I would say these 2 are worth your time, and the third one, and I can't speak to the 4th one, but the third one is definitely not really worth it, despite the fact that it resolves the situation that occurs in the Lewis Man. So, take that as you will. And I'll check in again with you when I've finished another book. Hi all, this is Editing Jenny coming in here to this video. I, for some reason, forgot to record sorry, I think you're crooked, a wrap up for White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. If I did record it, I've lost it, so I thought I would just recap that I did. It was the first audiobook that I finished in May. And I was reading this for my In Real Life book club, which has kind of, I missed the last few meetings, where the first 2 meetings where we talked about this book, and then it's on delay until July. So I'm hoping to go in July, and I think that first meeting in July will wrap up this book. So I've been very reluctant to, I actually listened to this on audio. It was not narrated by Robin DiAngelo, it was someone else. And I've been reluctant to read this book because when it came out, which was, in the early 2020s when like Black Lives Matter was very, high up in the list, and people were really self-educating around issues around anti-racism and things like that. There was some pushback against this book because it was written by a white woman, Robin DiAngelo. And I thought, well, I'm reading all these really great books by Black authors, by other authors of color, by Indigenous people around these issues, so I don't need to read this book. Fast forward to a few months ago, and the leader of our book club, who is Indigenous, said that he felt it was a worthy read and it had a lot of good stuff in it, and that he wanted to do it as the next book club read. And so I thought, well, if he says it's a good book and he wants us to read it, I'm going to read it. So I did. And I learned a lot from this book. I really found Robin DiAngelo is a person who goes into corporate worlds and tries to effectively make them more diverse and equal and equitable and inclusive. I guess that's the other thing. And so obviously the current US administration has declared a war on that area of work. So I'm not sure how much Robin DiAngelo is working anymore in these corporate environments. And obviously that was, the first few months of sound bites, and now the sound bites have moved on to, wars of a different nature. So politically speaking, this book is still very relevant to me. There was a lot of things in there that I found super helpful in terms of understanding my place as a person of privilege in environments where I am, trying to be an ally and not trying to create more harm. And I think it's really easy for us to do that as white people because we do not have the conditioning to be more sensitive. And it was a really well put together book. I think that if anyone or you yourself bristles against the ideas of equity, the ideas of inclusion, then it's, you really should read it. It's going to help you understand how to decenter yourself, how to take yourself out of the middle, and how to approach conversations with people of color who are trying to tell you that your actions, your language, your opinions are harmful. And so I thought it was really, really great, and I'm really glad I read it. And I think that it stands up to the test of time, however long it's been out. I think it's still very relevant. I think it's going to be relevant for a really long time, unfortunately. And so I would recommend it. It was fine on audio, and I'm sure reading in hardback is just as effective. So good book. Check it out. And I will now put you back to May. Hey all. So today I finished my second audiobook of May, and that is Eat, Pray, Love by Elizabeth Gilbert, and it is narrated by Elizabeth Gilbert. And so I'm reading this for a little kind of side project video that I will, and so I'll elaborate more on my thoughts and feelings about the book then. But I just wanted to say that as overall, as a memoir, I thought it was quite entertaining and interesting to learn about Elizabeth Gilbert's journey through, a painful divorce. And I would say that the main journey that she goes through is the journey of coming to know who she is and find a spiritual practice that she resonated with. I would say those are like the main themes. I think there were definitely some parts of it that were like she uses humor, and she has a very specific humor. So it didn't always land with me. Sometimes I found it amusing. Sometimes I found it just overkill, not really interested in, it just didn't land. And then I also think that the context that she's coming from, which is, turn of the 21st century, so like pre and then directly post 9/11, and then her way of relaying information around things like that was interesting. She particularly had a section where she talked about the repercussions on immigration after 9/11, which I'd kind of forgotten about. Obviously, this is in the US, but it was affecting different people that she encountered while she was in Bali. And I thought that was a really interesting thing to circle back to, given what's going on with immigration in the United States today, 20 years later. Actually, yeah, I would say it's like 22, 23 years later after she wrote this book. So yeah, I think it's interesting to see on Goodreads the average rating, because it's actually quite low, and I would have thought it would be higher, but I think this book is quite polarizing, it seems. So some people love it and some people hate it, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of people who are kind of in the middle about it. And I gave it 4 stars. I think that, I've read a lot of memoirs, and out of all those memoirs and all those journeys that I've gone on with people, this was not the worst one. And, she is, it was a cleverly written book, I think, in a lot of ways. Yeah. So like I said, there will be a future video where I will talk a little bit more about this book. And that has been my reading for May. A little bit all over the place, but nevertheless, that's usually how my reading is. So thank you so much for watching, and I will be back again soon with another video.